your notes, and I've just combined them because it confuses people otherwise. So if you'll see on the third bullet point, I've put those together, which might be different in your note. So you know the piano key sign. So when you're palpating, make sure you start on the clavicle. You go all the way out to the edge of the clavicle, and you press down on it. All right, and then I'm looking for the piano key sign. If it's separated, it's up like that. The piano key will pop back up again. Horizontal adduction. So again, I think I gave you a slide there for it, and I didn't. A horizontal adduction is when they put their arm up here, and again, I'm just going to put you up in this position. I'm horizontally adducted. I've gone through past that normal range of motion. I should be able to get I'm compressing that joint. That's going to cause a clavicle to pop up if it's injured. So that alone is painful for them. But now I can get my fingers in and I can palpate it some more. So the idea is just really the starting position of the athlete. They're horizontally adducted, and that will cause enough pain. And then I get my hands in to really, if I can feel that clavicle in there. The AC joint distraction and compression, again, it's kind of like how you would relocate the joint is the idea of distraction. So what I'm going to do is distractor at the elbow. I'm pulling it away here, and then I'm compressing. So I distract the joint, and I compress, and it causes a shearing kind of stress in there, and that's why they call it the shear stress. And all I did was I wrote out a note in your slides for you just to help you remember, but all of these are really well described in the textbook, and you can follow them along in the textbook. So it's the idea of downward traction on the upper extremity, and that will lead to a downward movement of the acromion process away from the clavicle, and if it's separated, that will be very painful for distraction. And then distraction with compression makes it that much more painful. So it's just a progression. Okay, glenohumeral instability. While I'm distracting, I can also see if there's what we call a sulcus sign. A sulcus sign is a gap. So now all of a sudden, if I'm distracting, it causes the glenohumeral joint to move away. So the humerus moves away from the glenoid fossa. It creates a gap. And so you'll see this little divot point of there. So I'm distracting. I'm looking for pain here, but I'm also looking for a sulcus sign through there. The apprehension test is basically the stop sign test. If I put her up in this position, and even if I pull forward with my hand a little bit, that will be painful. If you've ever dislocated, that's a very painful test. So you can see how he's looking for the sulcus sign. He's distracting. He's using his hands to maybe feel if there's a gap that forms there. The sulcus test, same thing. You're just looking for that divot, that sign. Glenohumeral instability, you can think of that as the apprehension or stop sign test. So again, you put them up in there, and that's maybe all they can tolerate. And if you add the gravity by laying them down on the table, that's even more pressure, and they can't stand for it if it's separate. Let's go on and do some of the. We'll go and do. If you go back to our list, I've got glenohumeral instability taken care of. Now the rotator cuff test. So now I'm looking for the sits muscles, and I want to isolate. My athlete's mechanism sounds like, yeah, they might have done something to the rotator cuff. I'm going to isolate each of those muscles and see if I can figure it out. So the first one is drop arm and empty can test. So if you look at the empty can test, it's literally like taking a can and pouring out its contents like this. So I get my athlete to hold their arms up like this, and you can even have it forward a little bit. And I'm going to ask you to pour out your can of Coke that's in your hand, and I might even put a little bit of pressure. Sometimes that movement causes pain, but if I put pressure on her, now do it against my resistance, right? No, hang on a second, you got to do it against, there we go, do it against there. There, and I give her resistance to that action, then that becomes very painful as well. So I know maybe that isolates my supraspinatus muscle because of that internal rotation test. The next one is for drop arm test. Now this one I usually do from behind because if the athlete sees me coming, they can sometimes brace themselves a bit more. But if you have a supraspinatus injury, if I came up to you like this and I pushed down, you wouldn't be able to hold your arms up. Their arms would drop. So sometimes I do that while I'm palpating. So no, you can sit. I'll just come up. And the athlete is sitting there like this, and I come behind, and you just karate chop them. Give them a karate chop across here and push it down. And that's all. It's a drop arm. You'll lose the power because of the supraspinatus involvement, and the arms just drop to their side. Okay, and then the lift-off test is also done from behind. So the lift-off isolates the subscapularis. Remember how we were pushing this muscle, we were trying to relax it to get under the scapula? Well, now I'm taking her arm, putting it in behind, and I'm going to give her some resistance and ask her to push off her back. So push against my resistance. If there's subscapularis involvement, that would be really painful. And you would also see her scapula pop out like a wing. So that one's a good one for that. So lift off, empty can, and drop arm tests are useful for each of those ones. And then finally, open door. Open door tests lateral rotation. So I'm literally going to put some resistance. I'm going to say, open your door. Like, there you go. So the humerus stays aligned. So I'm literally going to open it like this against my resistance. Keep going. Harder, harder, harder. Okay. So I'd expect her to have a little bit more pressure in there, and then she would try and open her door against me. Now, you don't always need to have the resistance. Sometimes it's just painful for them just to do that movement. But with my resistance, I can make it painful. I can add a little just to make sure, right? Okay, so Jurgensen's is the fancy name for the subluxing bicipital tendon. So you just know that that's the one where you put your fingers up here, and you're getting her to move her arm a little bit so you can feel the tendon running through there. It's called Jurgensen's. And Adson's. Now, Adson's is an interesting one. It's pretty well described in your book, but it's the idea that what I'm going to do is get her to start here with her arm like that. She's going to move her arm down her leg, while at the same time she's going to be starting to look up at the sky. So she moves this down, start looking up, go way back, go way back, go way, way back. Okay, so what's happening is you can look up, she's compressing all the structures through here and she's stretching it. So the movement is a problem if you have a compressed, what they call thoracic outlet. So everything from sort of the top thoracic region, you've got the nerves, you've got arteries running through there, and if there's any swelling, it's going through a very tight canal. So what happens is it puts pressure on it. And so when I put my head up like that, it stretches it and puts pressure on it. And a positive sign is the pain or even the loss of function in your arm because of that compression. So athlete turns head towards the affected shoulder at first when you're doing this. Not even necessary. Then I slowly start to move their hand like this. And you could, I mean, it says up there you could laterally rotate it, but really sometimes just sliding it down is enough. But what I also indicated up there is I could keep an eye on the radial pulse, because you find that when you're doing that action or even moving it up and away like that, sometimes what that does is it compresses the artery, and now you don't even get circulation down to the extremity. So you check the pulse, you keep your hand on the radial pulse and you check it. So Adson's is an important one to know, just because the athlete through the throwing motion might have compressed all that really vital area, and then it doesn't even have power through their arm because it's deinnervated the power, and it's also deinnervated or it's changed their blood flow as well. Okay, try them. Use your